Hello and welcome to this Logistics Business webinar. My name is Peter McLeod. I'm delighted to join you today. This one's sponsored by Geotab, and we are going to be looking at the Freight Efficiency Index that they've conducted and some very interesting findings from it. I'm joined today by Jamie McKean. He's BIFA's Policy Advisor for Sustainable Logistics. Hello, Jamie. Thanks a lot for coming here as an independent voice from the industry.
Hello, good morning.
And also Fabian Seithel. He's Geotab's Associate Vice President for Sales and Business Development, EMEA. Hi, Fabian. You're joining us from Germany today. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Thanks a lot, Peter, for having us.
Great pleasure. And also by Abhinav Vasu. He's Geotab's Associate Vice President. Hello, Abhinav, and it's great to have you on board with us today.
Hi, Peter. Glad to be here as well. I'm based out of London, by the way.
You're based out of London. Great. What a truly international team we have today. I'm in Poland. Now, I just wondered if you could just kick everything off, Abhinav, by just describing your role within the company and a little bit about what the company does, Geotab, and then we'll go around the table and ask everyone to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Associate Vice President for the Solution Engineering team across EMEA. And what our team does is work directly with a lot of our customers to really understand how best our solution fits within their remit. As part of that, we actually conducted the Freight Efficiency Index study as well, which was quite data heavy, and we had a lot of data scientists and some really, really interesting findings. Geotab being the number one telematics company in the world, our goal is to really drive towards a very sustainable future and most efficiently help fleets manage their assets and their business. We also have a lot of very strong use of AI, which has been around for a while, but we make some very strong advances on the insights that we offer. So I'm sure that'll be an interesting topic as well as we go through this.
Absolutely. Jamie, what about you now?
Yep, hi there. So James McKean from the British International Freight Association. I am the Sustainable Logistics Policy Advisor there. BIFA is the principal trade association for freight forwarders, and they are that crucial intermediary between the shipper and the carrier, and they organise freight movements by air, road, rail and sea. We have a very large membership, over 1,700 members, and very varied as well, from large multinationals, listed companies to SMEs, which is the biggest proportion of our members. And yeah, we cover all things sustainable logistics, so corporate sustainability and all modes as well. So looking at environmental regulation, how it will affect our members, and lobbying on behalf of our members to government. So there's a very wide remit.
And Fabian, last but not least, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Peter. So I oversee our work in the last mile and transport and logistics segment across EMEA, and my team works very closely alongside Abhinav's teams. And as Geotab, we recently celebrated 1 million connected vehicles across EMEA, and that gives us as well a lot of data insights to share with the transportation sector. And you touched on the study we conducted, and that's where we shared those insights in order to help fleets and operators to be as efficient and sustainable on the roads as they potentially can.
Yes, data. There's a lot of it about, shall we say. And you've gone and commissioned this study. Come up with some interesting findings. Now, perhaps Geotab would care to just explain some of the methodology behind it and maybe the reasoning why you commissioned the study in the first place.
Yeah, I can explain a bit of the methodology. I must, also apologize. The study is very data heavy. So if I glance away, it's because we have a lot of really interesting numbers. And I think the numbers actually stamp the authority of the study. So please apologize if I'm looking away a little bit. So we looked at a full year of connected vehicle data. So that's January to December 2025 from Geotab's platform. So this is all the vehicles that we've currently got connected as part of our customer base. And we looked at it in an anonymized and aggregated fashion from Jan to December. And we focused on 7 major European cities. So we focused on Berlin, Amsterdam, Dublin, Rome, Paris, London, and Madrid. So these are the core 7 cities that we looked at. And we scored each city on 2 major dimensions. So dimension 1 was how traffic flows, and we gave that a 75% weightage. So this looks at things like congestion burden, uncongested windows, travel time variability. And the second factor we looked at is what that actually costs. So what is the cost of congestion? So 25% weightage for that. And this is measuring mid-trip idling as a proxy for systemic waste. So the only way we could do that was looking at in the middle of an actual trip that a vehicle's taking, what is the idle time in the middle of that trip? And we did a 60-40 weightage between passenger vehicles and trucks to reflect what the real world demand actually looks like and logistics efficiency. And the key role that we played was to actually look at the key metrics, the methodology, and ensure that the data accurately reflected what the urban freight efficiency actually means. And this looks at everything that we collect from our Geotab platform in terms of the vehicles, their locations, where they are, how much idling happens in the vehicles, what the engine data refers to. So all of this was, through aggregated billions of data points, and that's basically what the methodology was used to get the study going.
Now, Fabian, if you give me that list of 7 cities and ask me to name one that I would suspect would be last on the list of efficiency, I was in Amsterdam last week, and it doesn't seem particularly last mile friendly, shall we say, for commercial deliveries. But I'm wrong, right?
Yes, exactly. So Berlin ranks first, Amsterdam ranks second. I think Amsterdam is really interesting. So when you come to Amsterdam, let's say, is very different from many other European cities, for sure. But the fact that, let's say, driving there is so difficult as well is leading to a fact that let's say traffic is not the largest problem, because they make every other mean of transportation or mobility very easy to access. So it's true that Amsterdam scores pretty well in the study. You're right.
Jamie, when you travel around European cities, one thing that strikes me, particularly in Amsterdam, is the clean air. I notice there's certainly around the last mile, there's a lot of cargo bikes, a lot of electric vehicles, that kind of thing. Is that the dream for London as well, would you say?
Yeah, so I've been recently to Amsterdam as well, and I would echo your views. Yeah, I go to London regularly, and there is an element of congestion and idling, and how much this is affecting air quality. And from an ESG perspective, we often talk about the environmental, but also the societal and the effect of that air pollution on particularly young children, but all people within the capital, and effect on their health. There's a big issue there, and it's really interesting to see, how some cities are doing it better than others, and it'd be really interesting to hear why that is the case.
Yes, and I think throw to Abhinav now. Maybe drill down into some of those findings, and what are the consequences of this inefficiency as much as anything as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamie, you touched on London. So let me just touch on London, right? So what we found is London is ranked close to the bottom. It's a second from the bottom as part of this study, right? Just in front of Madrid. And we also found that it's the least fuel efficient city out of all of these that we see. So it's about 4 or 5 times the figure that we got out of Paris. The reason for that is it's the stop-start nature and the unpredictable nature of the traffic flows within the city itself. So being a Londoner myself, you never really know where the congestion is going to happen. It's hard to predict that. And for trucks, we also saw an idle fuel ratio of 11.1%, which is some of the highest figures we've ever seen. So there is a lot of idling ongoing over here in the cities, which is basically leads to fuel use, which leads to emission emitted, which essentially leads to the air quality index dropping. And that's kind of the flow of it. So it was very interesting for us, and also for me being someone from London, it was good to know that there is a lot of improvement that can actually happen within the infrastructure and what fleets can actually start doing to improve that. So that's one of the stark things that really stood out for me when it came to the study around the London area.
And if you look at Amsterdam in comparison in London, the trips are simply much longer. So if the trip is longer, that leads to much more, let's say, idling on the trip. Amsterdam trips are much shorter from a depot to the customer.
And what was it in particular about Madrid, do we think, that caused it to come bottom of the 7?
So Madrid in particular, and maybe I'll start, and Abi, you add, is the unpredictability that makes route planning very difficult. So it's just very difficult to plan. Rush hour is not right at the exact same time. So there is barely any manageable window in the operating day. If you know that traffic congestion is let's say similar, then for route planning that gives you, say, a window of opportunity. In Madrid in particular, there is very difficult for planning. And one indicator that shows that, so we've been looking at, let's say, light commercial vehicles and trucks. And typically trucks score better in the study. And the reason being is that the planning on trucks is more diligent. Like the route management systems for trucks typically are more advanced. Let's say you have less trips with trucks, so you manage them better, and the technology being used in trucks is, let's say, most companies there use technologies such as our technologies to improve the routes, and that shows that trucks are typically scoring better when it comes to the study. In Madrid, that's different. So trucks don't score better. Let's say technology usage there is supposed to be lower than elsewhere, but more importantly, you can have a very good planning system in Madrid, but just the impact cannot so big compared to a place such as London, where technology can help relatively much more.
If I add to that, so another thing we saw in Madrid was also there's a very high percentage of harsh events. And by harsh events, we mean harsh braking, harsh acceleration. All of these lead eventually to a fuel impact. So when you are braking harsh, you then have to accelerate harsh, which means you're burning more fuel, and everything leads to that, essentially the same thing. And a lot of it is because of what Fabian mentioned regarding the congestion and the city infrastructure and the planning as well.
So Abhinav, looking at the findings of the survey, what are the implications for both carriers and of customers, their customers, for all these inefficiencies that come in these 7 cities that you looked at?
Yeah, I think I'll maybe weave that into what I think, what we think fleet managers should be looking into to try and really address these concerns. So I think the main thing is that city infrastructure is not something that changes overnight. It's something that takes a lot of time to actually change. So it's more important for carriers and for customers to actually work with the city rather than against the city. So really understand where these are and go into depth on the studies that we're helping them with to understand what actually is causing those congestions and what is causing those, massive idling times, as well as some of the harsh events. And for each of these different categories, you can try to address them a lot by first looking at your data. So looking at the individual data that you've got as a customer based on telematics of where you stand today and what are the small little changes you can make to actually drive that through. So I think that's very, very important. And I think they should also be prioritizing operational flexibility. So, using that data to really think about what are these little shifts and paradigm changes they can make to actually drive towards more efficiency. For example, smarter route planning. That is a very, very important thing. The second thing is, simple processes they can put into place with their drivers of, if you're idling more than X seconds, turn the engine off, save that, save the environment, sustainability, fuel cost, all of that. And these are some of those things, so behavioral idling really is a thing that we focus on. The other thing is also, the driver coaching element of it as well. So when we spoke about Madrid, for instance, we saw a very large uptick in the number of harsh events per 1,000 kilometers. So just a little bit of coaching, tips for the drivers, using the data to actually show them the benefits of driving safer for them rather than, the traditional carrot versus stick analogy. So these are some of those things that I would point out.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Abhinav. 2 things that I think are key from a fleet operator perspective. And the one perspective is the predictability piece. So if we look at congestion specifically, in most instances, there is predictability to it. So we can help customers, or customers can use that data in order to predict congestions and plan around it. Either plan routes differently or plan a second best choice enough buffer times in order to guarantee delivery windows to their customers. And the second item is what I would call something like operational discipline. I briefly touched on it before, but with the exception of Madrid, truck fleets consistently outperform the light commercial vehicle fleets. And that's not due to better vehicle tech. It's driven by structured processes that drive the route planning for truck fleets. And that gives the message that, let's say, the tools are available, they're used in truck fleets, and there is a let's say an improvement potential to be leveraged with them operational discipline to generate savings and increase customer satisfaction.
Jamie, from your perspective, or should I say from your members' perspective, do you see a switch towards more sustainable transportation as a way to help save costs or improve efficiency? What would you say would be the driver around that move right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge topic. So if we look at the UK generally, under the Climate Change Act 2008, there's a responsibility, a legal obligation to reach net zero by 2050. Now, domestic transport is the highest greenhouse gas emitter sector. So it used to be energy, but they've been on a journey over the past few years, renewables, improving, and now it's actually transport. So it's become a real focus for the government. From a business perspective, from our members' perspective, there's a cost to this. There's a cost to idling. There's a cost to inefficiency. We've got the Gulf crisis going on. Fuel prices have gone up massively over the past few months, which is really encroaching on members' margins and the hauliers' margins, which, hauliers often act on a sort of a 2% margin. And, their fuel costs can amount to sort of 30, 40% of that, of their overall costs. So if they can reduce the fuel usage, that's great from them from an economic cost perspective. Then also, as I said before, there's that environmental cost. So every time you burn fuel, that forms part of your Scope 1 emissions on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and then it forms part of your customer's Scope 3 emissions. And so customers are under pressure to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The businesses themselves, from the Scope 1 perspective, are under pressure. And then there's also the environmental costs. If you're idling in a city with a diesel truck, you're unfortunately you are, spewing out pollution, and that's affecting people walking by. It's affecting the overall quality of life. So there are so many different cost implications for this. I would say primarily, from a member's perspective, are working on those small margins. A lot of it is economic. So if that can be improved, then that's fantastic. And then anything else is brilliant as well.
So Abhinav, it sounds like you've set out to identify the challenge, and of course you can't overcome a challenge until you know what the challenge is. So where are we going to take these findings of the Freight Efficiency Index and use them for the benefit of us all?
Yeah. So my first advice would be that I think freight operators, fleet operators, anyone with a fleet of vehicles, the first thing they should probably look at is to go into a little bit more depth on the study. So in the study, like I mentioned at the beginning, for each city, we have a very clear breakdown of what we are seeing right now. So what that gives them is a little bit of a benchmark of information. So they understand where the city is today, the environment. That's basically it. And the second thing would be to then start using data to separate behavior from environment. So there's, for example, if I give you an example, just to kind of lay my point, there's systemic idling, which is based on, because of the roads, it's congested. You don't have a choice but to idle. And then there's behavioral idling, which is, idling caused by just the behavior of the person behind the wheel. And this data actually gives you the kind of foundation to have a more informed decision. So that would be my two main key takeaways that I would like people to take away is the first one is to go into a little bit of depth on the report and identify your city and go into that little bit more intricate detail. And the second would be to really figure out what is the behavioral and the environmental segregation between what you're currently doing.
Fabian, if I gave you a blank piece of paper, let's call it a map, a pencil and a ruler, and asked you to design a European capital city that's going to give hauliers, going to give all vehicle users the most efficient opportunities, none of them would look like Madrid or Amsterdam or Paris, would they? I presume there'd be a lot of wide, straight lines there. So, how much of this issue is, that's what we've got, that's what we that we need to deal with that, and how much of it can we ourselves make a difference by changing a few things?
Very good question, and I think we most of us will love the charm of let's say cities and how they historically have evolved. And Abhinav alluded to it earlier that let's say you don't change that overnight, and actually, if you change it, you have a high factor of congestion because that takes a lot of construction sites. So I think is the advice is going into the data side, and technology is available not only for the enterprise grade, the largest of the customers, but is broadly available as well for the mid market. So can be used in order to leverage savings. From a city planning perspective, and if I may take a look into the future, I mean, one thing that I'm personally just looking forward to a lot, in particular on the heavier freight side, is that inductive charging on the EV side. Because let's say if you're then in traffic jam, if you can at least charge while you're in congestion, and then basically I think that's not a quick win, but I think that's where we can work all together and let's say optimizing the time at least. So if you then use it for instance, charging while you're in stop and go traffic, I think that could be something useful. And that's how I would try and design my, call it, new city, next to like all the infrastructural planning, that you can use the time, let's say, beneficial if you're in a congested area.
How close are we to that, Jamie, the inductive charging as a norm?
Not something I have a ton of knowledge about, but I would say what's interesting is that idea of electric trucks. So what we have now, and how that's going to look in the future. So in the UK, we've got a number of things going on at the moment. So we've got the ZHID project, the Zero Emission HGV Infrastructure Demonstrator Program, where we're putting over 300 electric trucks on the road operationally, and then working out how that's going to work with motorway charging, depot charging. So there's a lot going on in that sphere. But I think what we're going to see in the future, talking about your future city, is actually it will be slightly different, because you're going to have to account for probably electric truck charging, and then potentially, a bit further in the future, hydrogen as well. So there's a lot going on.
And Abhinav, we're not going to be able to persuade city planners to run a highway through the middle of, for example, Paris overnight. So where can businesses go first? Freight operators, put their initial focus to get some quick wins from based on the findings of the survey.
I think the first thing they could do is, as we alluded to earlier, the switch to EV, I think, is something that we haven't touched on too much in this webinar. But I think switching vehicles to EV is definitely a thing that can be done today. We've seen a lot of fleets actually do that very successfully as well. And what you can actually go into that level of depth on is to really understand which vehicles can transition to EVs, and what EVs can actually be part of the procurement decision. So that's also part of the data-driven piece. The second one, again, like we mentioned, city infrastructures, highways, that's not going to happen overnight. The other one would be the behavioral side. So I keep touching on the behavioral side, but I think for a very long time, the behavioral side has always been seen as a bit of a negative, a bit of a slap on the wrist. And I think we need to transition that and pivot that completely as a group here in the industry to say, this is actually behaviorally making and helping you, the person behind the wheel, which in turn also helps the business in terms of costs, in terms of savings, in terms of sustainability. So I would say these two things, just as opposed to a couple of the other things I mentioned earlier, to add on.
And I guess, Fabian, from your customer's perspective, I would imagine sort of predictability of delivery is probably more important than the actual speed of delivery. Is that right? At least if the receiving party knows exactly when that's going to arrive. then that visibility will help them considerably when it comes to planning some of their movements.
Yeah, there's two sides of it. So as an operator, you want to be efficient, and as a customer, you want to have insights. So I don't think it's only about the insight on the customer side. It's as well, let's say, Jamie touched on it. There's huge cost pressure. So you as well don't want to use resource and precious employee time on the road. So those perspective both matters. I think, and everybody knows it from, let's say, personal experience. The insight, hey, the delivery is 3 stops away or is 20 stops away. I think we're at a pretty good level there in terms of insight. As Geotab, we're mostly focusing with our customers how they can be efficient on the road, and to look at their side of the house. How can they use resource in the best possible way and improve, let's say, limit the time they spend without adding value, without making any distance, so to say. So that's our main focus, and I think that's where the higher improvement potential sits from an industry perspective.
And Jamie, are things getting better or worse, when it comes to this, urban deliveries? Should we be hopeful that, we can crack it at some point in the future?
That's a very broad question. I'll try my best to answer. I mean, there's a few issues from an EHGV perspective, in the sense that you do get some payload loss because of the regulations in the UK. There is some work undergoing with that. But essentially, if there's some payload loss with an EHGV at the moment, it's all about improving that efficiency. You have to ensure that, loads are consolidated. You have to ensure that you reduce your empty running, because unfortunately, if there's even just a small amount of payload loss and that's across a fleet perspective, then you may have to have more vehicles on the road. And obviously, that's not going to help with congestion. So efficiency gains are so important, not just from a cost perspective, but they also factor into congestion and the wider industry.
Abhinav, how can fleet operators use data to help their performance, to help them be smarter when it comes to urban deliveries?
A couple of things that are available through the data is, smarter route planning, which you can actually use to figure out how your fleets have been routing their deliveries so far and what are the best ways to optimize that. So I would probably state that one as an important one to really figure out, how better to do deliveries more efficiently, and then also understand in terms of the fleet that a fleet operator has, what is the actual utilization of those vehicles? Because we have seen in the past with many fleets, there are vehicles that are, let's call it, on the shelf, that aren't really doing that much. Do you really need that vehicle? Can you transition that? Could that vehicle go into, or do you want to sweat that asset? Or would you rather transition a few more into a more efficient, energy-consuming vehicle? This is what I would mention on that.
So, Fabian, apologies for the broadness of this question. I gave you a blank piece of paper before. This one's probably not going to be any easier to get your head around. But I just wanted to, maybe looking ahead to the next 3 to 5 years, what's going to separate the best performing fleets? Perhaps, using the findings of the survey to help you answer that.
Yeah, very good question. And we live in a time where technology is just developing so rapidly, and in particular in the delivery and transportation industry, efficiency and sustainability are basically two very, very key items. I think the best performing fleets are those that are leverage technology and newly arising technology fed by data. I mean, there's so much data available on every delivery, etc., that use new AI-driven technology, and in order to combine efficiency and sustainability in the best possible manner. From a cost perspective, we're seeing it today. We have many customers that are operating electric vehicles cheaper than combustion engine vehicles. So there is a break even if you manage them efficiently, in particular in a delivery and in an urban area type context. And if you combine that with the high fidelity, smart data driven route planning, I think those are the fleets that are set up best for success. And I can reiterate my message that technology, I mean, the vehicles and the software are available not only for the largest of the fleets, but as well for the mid-market. It's broadly available. So basically, from a competitive standpoint, every player in the industry can be very well set up to compete in the marketplace.
And Jamie, sitting on a trade body as you do, your members represent a huge amount of contributors to the UK economy. So I guess an efficient commercial transport fleet greatly benefits everyone, the whole economy.
There's actually a real link between GDP growth and road freight. Actually, there is a substantive causal link there. So actually, the more efficient we can get our road freight systems, the better planned our cities are. That's always good for the economy. I think what was clear about the report was interesting is about keeping things moving, even if it's moving slowly. As long as it's moving, that's a real benefit, which I found really interesting. And I think, and also is that psychological aspect as well. I think, if drivers are stuck in traffic, even myself as a passenger driver, as long as I'm moving, I feel better. So maybe from a driver happiness perspective as well, that might improve rather than feeling that frustration of I've got this many deliveries to do and I'm stuck in traffic and it stands still. Actually, as long as it's moving, at least that's really good.
So, Abhinav, as we reach the end of this webinar, I wonder if you could just pull all these strings together. Perhaps it's my job, but I'm going to ask you. How about that? What we've been talking about today, summarize what have been some of the takeaways and also where you think the hope lies for the future.
Yeah, great way to end that, Peter. So I would say what we've discussed today overall is around the study that we've done around individual cities and what we see in terms of the city infrastructure and how the traffic flows are. Jamie made a very nice point about a slow crawl sometimes just psychologically feels better than a fast stop-start. And a fast stop-start is sometimes what we see in London as well as a slow crawl, which is what probably frustrates a lot of drivers. I would say the key takeaways for me would be to plan with and around your city, not against your city. That's key takeaway number one. The second one would be to really prioritize the operational flexibility, really figure out how you can be flexible around operation and use data to really reward your fleet and your drivers. The data should also be used to separate behavioral versus environmental implications. So there are some that would take longer to change, infrastructure, that sort of thing, versus behavioral, which can be very seismically shifted to a positive stream of resolution. Dynamic routing in terms of just key technology pieces. I think dynamic routing is a very important thing. Transitioning to electric vehicles, that's another key takeaway that I'd take. And then I would also really encourage people to read the report in its entirety, especially based on your cities, because that's where you really get into the detail on what you could do.
Great. You summarized that beautifully. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure to be talking with you today. Thank you, Fabian, Jamie, Abhinav. And thank you also to Geotab for supporting this logistics business webinar. For all the latest logistics news, please visit our website at logisticsbusiness.com. It just remains for me to say thank you to our audience for joining us today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy working lives to tune in to us. And once more, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, guys.
Just going around. Thank you, Fabian.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
And Abhinav, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Peter.
And goodbye from me, Peter McLeod. Goodbye.